The shabby clock hanging on the stained yellow wall struck exactly 4 in the morning. The second hand ticked with a dry, relentless rhythm, each beat like a hammer striking the heart. In the dark parking lot of the Sunset Junction Diner, only the flicker of a dying neon sign lit the night. A figure appeared, stepping out of an old Ford Ranger, its paint chipped and peeling. He wore a cheap baseball cap, his hand gripping the handle of a rusty mop cart, pushing it forward, the wheels screeching like a silent declaration of war. This was Evan Carlisle, the man the city believed would be sitting in a boardroom at this hour, discussing million-dollar deals. But tonight, he was here, disguised as a night janitor. No one knew his true identity. The owner of the diner chain spanning 3 states, the man who had built the Sunset Junction empire from nothing. Evan's life began in the sweltering heat of a kitchen, where steam suffocated the air. At 17, young Evan stood knee-deep in piles of dirty dishes, his hands cracked from detergent, his ears ringing with the sound of breaking plates. Relatives mocked him. "Is this all you'll ever do? Wash dishes for the rest of your life?" Those taunts haunted him. But in that dark corner, he forged a dream. One day, his name would shine on a signboard. He failed. His first restaurant collapsed in a year. Evan survived on instant noodles for half a year, sleeping in a dingy, rented room, tasting the bitterness of losing everything. But he refused to give up. Failure only made his hands harder, his will sharper. 15 years later, from the ashes, Evan rebuilt. Sunset Junction now had more than 20 branches, a trusted stop for travelers on the open road. And yet, at Route 66, the branch closest to his beginnings, something had begun to rot. Reports showed rising customer complaints, employees quitting in waves, profits slipping. The CFO advised, "Shut it down, cut your losses." But Evan knew numbers told only half the story. If people were breaking down, the problem lay in culture, in leadership. There was only one way to uncover the truth: return to where it all began. Invisible, listening from the shadows. He pushed open the back door of the restaurant. The hinges groaned like the sigh of an old man. In the silence, a fragile sound stopped him. A thin, trembling voice singing softly, like a thread swaying in the dark. He stepped closer, under the pale glow of a yellow lamp. There, a young woman sat folding brown aprons, her hands trembling yet careful, as if performing a ritual. Each crease was pressed flat, each loose thread smoothed out with care. Light revealed her weary face, eyes ringed with exhaustion yet steady with resolve. She was Maya Lopez, 23, a waitress. Maya looked up and caught his gaze. She startled, the apron slipping to the floor. She hurried to pick it up, clutching it to her chest. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice small, overly polite, the voice of someone who had grown used to apologizing even when not at fault. Evan forced a smile, masking the ache in his chest. "No need. I'm just the new janitor." Relief flickered across Maya's face. She bent back to her task, though her hands still trembled. But Evan, whose eyes had once known the life of a dish pit, saw through it. That trembling was not only from fatigue, it was from fear. He pretended to adjust his cart, but his eyes stayed fixed on her movements. Then he noticed something unusual. Each time she finished folding an apron, Maya would take a small pen from her pocket, lean close, write a few words inside the fabric, and smile faintly. Just a fleeting smile, before she folded it tight and stacked it on the pile. again and again, like a secret ritual. Evan's chest tightened. He understood. Numbers never told the whole story. Here, hidden in the folds of an apron, was the truth he came to find. He sat down, his calloused hand resting on the broom handle. In that moment, he was not a millionaire CEO. He was a man who had once been dismissed, now standing before a young woman, also dismissed. Evan whispered to himself, "No one stays invisible forever, not under my eyes." Evan stood still in the dim room, hearing only the creak of the ceiling fan and the faint scratch of Maya's pen. Each time she finished writing, the corners of her lips lifted ever so slightly, then faded, like a fragile flame snuffed out by a passing breeze. He narrowed his eyes, trying to catch the words. The handwriting was small, slanted, hurried, as though afraid of being discovered. The young woman folded the apron neatly, placing it on the pile like a diary never meant to be opened. Evan felt his blood quicken. Why would a waitress write on her uniform? And why did her eyes carry such sorrow? He took a step closer, keeping his voice calm. "Do you come this early every day?" Maya looked up, her eyes brightening for a fleeting second before dropping back down, her hands still busy. "I like to prepare ahead of time. When the diner opens, everything should be ready so customers feel more comfortable." Her voice was soft, gentle, as if sacrificing sleep to come in early was the most natural thing in the world. Evan watched silently. He remembered himself at 17, arriving before dawn to scrub kitchen floors in hopes someone would notice. No one ever did. Maya went on. "I remember all the regulars here. Mrs. Davis, black coffee, no sugar. Mr. Howard, eggs medium, only one slice of toast. And little Leo, the boy who always asks for extra whipped cream on his hot cocoa." Evan froze. She wasn't just serving, she was observing, memorizing every detail as if her customers were family. For a moment, he saw a light in her eyes, a pure, untainted faith. But it flickered and vanished when the conversation brushed against wages and long shifts. Her smile collapsed into a weary nod. He glanced at her uniform, the elbows worn thin, the hem frayed, shoes polished but split at the seams. Maya folded each apron carefully, her hands trembling slightly. Dedication wrapped in poverty. Then Evan saw it clearly. On the inside hem of the apron she had just folded, a small line of writing. "Double shift, nearly fainted. No one asked." His heart clenched. These weren't simple notes. This was a diary, a living journal stitched into fabric. In that instant, he heard the taunt from long ago. "You're just a dishwasher, invisible." The image of the 17-year-old boy with cracked hands came rushing back. He drew a deep breath. Maya had no idea the new janitor was reading the truth she had been hiding for so long. And she had no idea that the man standing before her, the one treated as insignificant, was in fact the owner of the entire Sunset Junction empire. Evan gritted his teeth, holding the secret. It wasn't time to reveal himself yet. He needed to see more, hear more, gather everything. But inside, a fire had ignited. This girl could not remain invisible forever. He turned away slowly, though his eyes never left Maya, who was softly humming, folding the fabric as if she were stitching pieces of her soul into it. And in that moment, Evan swore to himself, "I will uncover the truth hidden in these words, and when the time comes to expose it, the whole world will see you." The sound of leather shoes struck sharply against the tile floor, each step cutting through the air like a whip. Evan looked up just as the door swung open. A man in his 40s walked in, his suit wrinkled but buttoned tightly, his slicked-back hair gleaming under the light. He wore a wide smile, but his eyes betrayed a cold glint. The nameplate on his chest read, Dylan Cross, Branch Manager. "What's going on here?" Dylan's voice rang out, warm but hollow, the kind of warmth meant only to disguise. Maya flinched, clutching the stack of aprons tightly to her chest. "I was just getting things ready early, Mr. Dylan." His gaze slid over her before settling, his tone hardening. "Early? Or are you just wasting company time because you've got nothing better to do?" The smile dropped from his face, replaced by a sneer of contempt. Evan's grip tightened around the mop handle, that old familiar sting returning. The memory of a kitchen manager barking in his face when he was just a boy scrubbing dishes. Dylan stepped closer to Maya, lowering his voice, but making sure every word could still be heard. "Customers don't care about neatly folded aprons. They want their food fast. Stick to your real job and stop wasting time." Maya bowed her head, lips trembling. "Yes, I understand." Evan caught the tightness in her throat, the way she swallowed back the lump of humiliation. Around them, other employees passed by, eyes averted, pretending to be busy. No one stepped in. No one dared. Suddenly, a shout erupted from the kitchen. "The eggs are burnt! Start over! Hurry up!" Dylan spun on his heel, his voice booming louder than the crackle of oil in the pan. "Do any of you even know how to cook? Do you want every customer walking out the door?" The kitchen fell silent. Evan could feel the chill of fear spread through the room like a draft. Then Dylan turned to a young waitress, Kara, his voice suddenly honeyed. "Don't forget to make my coffee the way I like it. When a VIP handles it, I know it'll be done right." The girl blushed, nodded quickly, her eyes caught between fear and forced flattery. Evan froze inside. In only a few minutes, he had seen the disease eating this place alive. A manager with two faces, sweet to those he favored, ruthless to those too weak to fight back. Dylan's eyes landed on Maya again, dripping with disdain. "Don't let me catch you wasting time again. If a customer complains, I'll cut your pay on the spot." Maya clutched the apron so tightly her knuckles turned white, biting her lip until it bled. But still she nodded. In that moment, Evan felt his chest burn. The declining profit margins in the reports now had a face, a name, and a voice. And it was Dylan Cross. He bowed his head, pretending to return to scrubbing the floor. But inside he carved the moment into stone. A silent vow rang in his chest. "I'll wait, and when I expose him, he won't have anywhere left to hide." The front doors of the diner swung open. Morning light spilled inside as the first customer stepped in, carrying with him laughter and the chill of the street air. The breakfast shift began. The clatter of plates, the scrape of chairs, the calls for orders. Everything blended into a chaotic symphony. Maya darted through the room like a shadow. She wiped tables already clean, picked up fallen napkins, lined up silverware with meticulous precision. Each action was flawless, yet nearly invisible, because no one cared enough to notice. Another server dropped a napkin, and Maya bent quickly to retrieve it. Not a single word of thanks. In the corner, a high chair was still sticky from yesterday's candy. Maya crouched, scrubbing each crusted patch, sweat beading on her forehead. Again, not a single glance in her direction. Evan stood at the end of the counter, mop in hand, his eyes following every detail. Each act of care Maya performed sank silently into the pit of indifference. Meanwhile, Kara, the young waitress favored by Dylan, needed only to flash a sweet smile at a guest to be met with praise and compliments. She laughed easily with the kitchen staff, joked with co-workers, while Maya slipped wordlessly between tables, trays, and curt commands. Then it happened. Maya carried out a heavy tray stacked with plates, 8 full breakfasts, glasses teetering on the edge. She moved slowly, carefully, but a slick of oil streaked across the floor. Her worn heel slipped, the tray tilted. Porcelain rattled against porcelain, the sharp clinking cutting through the diner until every voice went silent. Evan tightened his grip on the mop handle, his chest seizing. For an instant he didn't see Maya. He saw himself at 17, trembling in a dish pit, hands raw and shaking. Maya steadied, knees bent, wrist twisting just in time. The plates wobbled, swayed, then settled. Not a single dish hit the floor. She set the tray down and offered a strained smile. A ripple of applause rose, but it wasn't admiration. It was laughter. Customers amused at the near disaster as though they had just watched a sideshow act. Maya bowed her head, whispered an apology, and hurried away. Evan's hand shook around the mop handle, rage burning in his veins. She had saved the tray, yet all she received in return was mockery. Before his anger could cool, Dylan's voice sliced through the air like a knife. "Cold coffee? Of course it's you, Maya. Always you messing up." The guest merely shook his head, ready to say he would take another cup. But Dylan raised his voice, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Maya lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'll make another right away." Dylan waved her off and turned to Kara, his tone suddenly dripping with honey. "You handle it, Kara. Always perfect. Excellent work." Maya bit her lip and disappeared behind the counter, her small frame folding in on itself. Evan watched her go, his chest roiling. In that moment he understood. The numbers on the reports were only the surface. The truth was here, in flesh and bone. A devoted young woman buried under the shadow of a toxic manager. He bent down, pretending to mop the floor, but his pulse thundered with an oath carved deep inside him. "I'll let him dig his own grave, and when he falls, I'll make sure she is pulled into the light." The hollow laughter and flattery of Dylan still echoed somewhere out front, but Evan had already slipped behind the counter, pretending to gather dirty linens. Inside, it felt as though a weight of stone was crushing his chest. That young woman was being ground down day after day, while the world around her chose to look away. The break room in the back was silent. A harsh fluorescent tube flickered overhead, filling the air with the acrid bite of bleach. In the corner, a stack of aprons was folded neatly, standing like a quiet tower. Evan stopped, his hand trembling as he picked up the one on top. The cotton was stiff, faintly musty, frayed at the seams, but when he turned it over, his heart clenched. Small, careful lines of handwriting emerged, painfully neat. September 25th, double shift. Almost fainted. No one asked. He swallowed hard. His fingers shook as he reached for another apron. November 22nd, worked Thanksgiving alone. Then another. October 12th, they called me invisible. I smiled. Evan snapped the fabric closed, struggling to breathe. Those words cut into him like blades, ripping open memories he thought had long scarred over. He saw himself at 17 again, hunched in a dish pit, while relatives sneered, "You're just a dishwasher. Nobody even sees you." The old wounds bled fresh. He pulled out more aprons. Each one was another page of a hidden diary, sometimes exhaustion, sometimes a rare flicker of joy. More often, moments of being belittled. All of it buried, unseen, unacknowledged. Except by him. Clutching one apron tightly in his hands, Evan whispered, "These aren't notes. They're testimony." Cries carved into silence. From outside came the sound of Kara's bright laughter with a customer, Dylan's barked orders crashing like hammers on the staff. And here, in this dim back room, Evan held a journal stitched together with sweat and tears. How long had Maya lived this way? How many nights had she stayed behind, writing these small lines just to remind herself that she existed, even when the world refused to see her? Evan set the stack of aprons back carefully, exactly as it was. But his eyes no longer looked the same. In them now burned fire, fire of truth, fire of a promise. He walked out in silence, each heartbeat steady, deliberate, ringing with resolve. I will read every word. I will expose it all. And when this comes into the light, no one will ever call her invisible again. The diner began to fill with customers. The clinking of silverware and the mingling scents of grease and coffee filled the air. Maya moved quickly, carrying trays like a shadow slipping between the chatter and laughter. No one noticed the exhaustion in her eyes. Evan, still in his disguise as the janitor, wiped the floor from a corner. His gaze never left her slender figure. He was no stranger to enduring hardship, but what was about to unfold made his chest tighten. A man staggered in, his shirt wrinkled, tie hanging loose, the stench of alcohol clinging to him. He dropped into a chair and waved his hand. "Hey, sweetheart, bring me another beer. And why don't you sit here with me for a while?" Maya forced a faint smile, her voice soft and polite. "I'll bring you some water first, then the beer will be right out." She turned to leave, but a rough hand clamped around her wrist, squeezing hard. The tray shook, glasses rattling against each other. "Don't walk away. Or do you think you're too good for a customer like me?" The nearby tables stirred with whispers. Some frowned in discomfort, others simply shook their heads and turned away. No one stood up. Maya pulled at her arm, her face draining of color. "Please, let go, sir. I'm begging you." From the corner, Evan ground his teeth. Every instinct screamed at him to rush over, to rip away the disguise, to shatter the silence with his voice. His knuckles turned white from gripping the mop handle. Then Dylan appeared. He strode forward quickly, shoving the drunk's chair back with force. "Out, now!" The command cracked through the diner like a whip. The man stumbled, cursing, finally letting go of Maya as Dylan dragged him toward the door. It slammed shut behind them, and the room exhaled in relief. A few weak claps broke out. Maya stood frozen, her hands still trembling. Before she could steady herself, Dylan turned back, his eyes flashing with contempt. "You were about to let a little scene like that turn into a circus? You should have handled it before he made a fuss. You drew too much attention from the customers." Maya's face went pale. She lowered her head, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'm sorry." Not a single coworker spoke. They looked down, avoiding Dylan's gaze. The entire room drowned in complicit silence. Evan felt rage ignite in his chest. The girl who had just been harassed now had to bow her head and take the blame, in front of everyone. He wanted to shout, to rip away this disguise, but he knew, if he revealed himself too soon, the evidence would vanish beneath Dylan's excuses. Maya turned, retreating into the kitchen, her small frame trembling. Evan watched her go, his heart heavy as stone. To him, she was not just a waitress being humiliated. She was himself, 2 decades ago, the boy at the sink called invisible. He lowered his head, whispering a vow only he could hear. He dared to lay the blame on her. I'll turn that very blame into the verdict that condemns him. Afternoon settled in. The noise of the lunch rush faded, leaving only the faint smell of grease in the air and the hurried clatter of cutlery being cleared away. Maya carried a tray of dishes into the kitchen, her thin frame swallowed by the swinging wooden door. Evan pretended to mop the floor in the hallway, ears straining. Through the narrow crack in the door, he caught Kara's whisper to Dylan. Dylan, about earlier, that customer was clearly out of line. Why did you blame Maya? A brief silence. Then Dylan's voice came, low but dripping with venom. She's always like that. Weak, no presence, no leadership in her. People like her only bring problems. When customers look down on her, it's exactly what she deserves. Evan froze, blood rushing hot to his temples. Kara's voice wavered. But I think she works really hard. Dylan cut her off, his tone sharp and cold. Hard work? That kind of person never gets far. Head down, doing chores, no influence. She'll always be nothing but a shadow. Invisible. The word invisible sliced through the air like a knife. Evan's grip tightened on the mop handle, his knuckles cracking. That word again. The very word Maya had scrawled inside her aprons. The very word that haunted his own youth. In the kitchen, Kara fell silent. Evan pictured her eyes shrinking back, head lowered beneath Dylan's authority. That silence only fueled his arrogance. Remember this, Kara. Dylan pressed on, smug. You have a future because you know how to win people over. But Maya, she'll never be more than a table wiper. I will never give her the chance to move up. Evan felt his blood boil. Every word Dylan spoke wasn't just crushing Maya's spirit, it was poisoning the entire workplace. The kitchen door suddenly swung wider. Maya stepped out, an empty tray in her hands. Her eyes caught the smirk still curling on Dylan's lips. In that instant, she knew she had just heard the truth. Her shoulders trembled slightly, but she bowed her head and walked past, her presence shrinking into nothing but a shadow. Evan watched her go, his chest tightening. He knew those words would become wounds she carried for years, unless someone stood up. He exhaled heavily, forcing the rage down, etching a vow deep into his heart. He thinks she's invisible, but he will be destroyed by the very thing he despises most. Night fell, and the diner slowly emptied. The clatter of silverware faded to faint echoes, leaving only the weary neon light casting its tired glow across the tiled floor. Evan found an excuse to slip away from the dining area, quietly pushing his mop cart into the locker room. The space was silent, filled only with the acrid sting of bleach and the metallic tang of rust seeping from old steel lockers. And in the corner, Maya's stack of aprons sat neatly folded, like a mountain of fabric holding something far heavier than anyone could see. He reached for one. The cotton was worn thin, seams frayed like open wounds. Evan turned it over, and there they were, tiny, careful letters stitched into the fabric of her days. He read slowly, each word piercing his chest like a needle. May 18th, trapped in the kitchen with a broken air conditioner, soaked head to toe in sweat. No one noticed. July 30th, a child drew a rainbow on a napkin and slipped it into my pocket. I kept it all day. March 8th, Mom called. Cancer treatment is showing progress. I cried after my shift. Evan sank onto the wooden bench, his hands trembling. It felt as though he was holding someone's very soul in his palms, their pain, their fleeting joys, their suffocating loneliness. These fragments weren't written to be read by anyone. They were proof of existence, proof that Maya was surviving in a world determined to forget her. He picked up another apron. The words froze him in place, stealing his breath. October 12th. They called me invisible. I smiled. 7 words, yet they hit like a hammer against his memory. Suddenly, he was 17 again, standing at the sink, scrubbing plates while a relative's voice cut cold. "You're just a dishwasher. No one even sees you." The old wound ripped open, now bleeding into the pain of this young woman. Tears filled his eyes, unstoppable. But they weren't only tears of sorrow. They were tears of oath, tears of vow. Gently, Evan folded each apron back into place, as if handling sacred relics. In his head, the numbers from recent reports rang out, profits falling, complaints rising, staff turnover climbing. But now he knew the truth. The truth wasn't in spreadsheets. It was here, stitched into fabric, carved into words. His voice broke the silence of the empty room, low but unwavering. "This isn't a secret anymore. This is an indictment, and I will bring it into the light." Stepping back into the hallway, he clenched his fist tight. In the darkness, Evan's eyes burned with a cold steel flame. The day he called her invisible will be the day he disappears. Dawn broke. Pale light slipped through the frosted window, cutting into the break room that was more familiar with the dim yellow of tired fluorescent bulbs. Maya sat there, her back slightly hunched, both hands clutching a crumpled sheet of paper. On the table, the stack of aprons still lay in neat rows, but today the ritual was broken. The pen in her hand no longer etched words into fabric. Instead, it trembled as she carved each letter into a resignation letter. Evan entered from the hallway, pushing his mop cart in disguise. He froze. Before him, Maya was signing her name, her lips pressed tight, her eyes rimmed red though no tears fell. The tears had long dried. What remained was the exhaustion of someone who felt she had nothing left to lose. "I'll give this to Dylan after the meeting today," Maya whispered, her voice as fragile as a thread about to snap. Evan felt his chest sink. He wanted to rush forward, to tear that paper to shreds, to shout, "Don't walk away. Do you have any idea how much you matter?" But he clenched his teeth and held it in. Not yet. Maya placed the letter neatly beside the stack of aprons, like a farewell. Her eyes drifted to the small window where the gray sky hung heavy over Route 66. And then, something made Evan's heart crack. She pulled out another apron, turned it over, and scribbled a final note on the inside. He stepped closer, catching a glimpse of the tiny, slanted words. "March 17th, I almost gave up, but a child called me a superhero." Evan gripped the mop handle so hard it felt like his chest might burst. The memory of little Leo came flooding back. The boy's bright eyes, his laughter ringing clear. "Miss Maya is my superhero." That was the last thread tying her to this place. And now, even that thread was fraying. He stepped back, his figure swallowed by the shadows in the doorway. Inside, a scream rose up from his chest. "No, I cannot let her vanish the way I once did in my youth. If she leaves, this place will lose its final heartbeat, and I will lose my chance to redeem the mistakes of my past." Evan's eyes blazed with fire. He knew there could be no more hesitation. The meeting that afternoon would not just be about policy updates, as Dylan had claimed. It would be the day truth was exposed, the day masks were torn away. He turned quietly, heart pounding, carrying with him a vow carved deep into his bones. She wrote that she was invisible, but today, I will make the world see her. The wall clock struck exactly 2 p.m. The small meeting room of Sunset Junction was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and lingering grease from the kitchen. Employees sat in silence, some with their arms crossed, others with their heads lowered to avoid one another's eyes. On the table, Dylan spread out a stack of papers, his chin raised high like a man who believed he held absolute control. "All right, this is just a quick policy update. Let's keep it short," he said with a smug smile, his tone dripping with condescension. Evan sat at the back of the room, his head bowed, the brim of his cap shading most of his face. Beside him, Maya stood quietly against the wall, a crumpled resignation letter clutched tightly in her pale fingers. No one seemed to notice the woman in the corner, dressed in a gray business suit, Elaine Porter, the Director of Human Resources. She flipped through a thick file, her eyes cold, observant. Dylan began his speech, his voice coated in false sweetness. "We need stricter discipline. We need to cut costs, avoid mistakes, and some people here need to learn how to work faster, to stop drawing complaints from customers." His eyes flicked toward Maya, his lips curling into a smirk. A few employees shifted uncomfortably, lowering their gazes. Maya remained still, but her eyes shimmered with tears threatening to fall. Evan drew in a deep breath. His heart pounded in his chest. The moment had come. Slowly, he rose to his feet. His deep, steady voice cut through the room. "This meeting is going to take a different turn." The room froze. Dylan snapped around. "Who are you? This is an internal meeting. Sit down, janitor." Evan reached up and removed his cap. In an instant, the air turned to stone. Employees gasped. Whispers shot through the room. "My God, it's him. Evan Carlisle." Dylan's face drained of color, then flushed red. He stammered. If I had known you were here, then—" "That's the problem," Evan cut him off, his voice sharp as steel. "You only show respect when you see power, but when it's someone without a voice, you trample them." The words sliced through the air like a blade. A few employees broke down in tears. Others nodded with heavy sighs. Maya trembled, the resignation letter slipping from her hand onto the floor. Elaine stepped forward and laid a thick file onto the table. "These are the promotion requests submitted by Maya Lopez. Every single one was blocked in Dylan's office, accompanied by falsified evaluations signed by him." Dylan's face turned chalk white. "No, that's not true. This is just a misunderstanding." Evan lifted an apron into the air, his voice breaking with emotion yet firm as stone. "And this is the truth he tried to bury. The words Maya wrote every day, every shift. Read them." He read aloud. "October 12th. They called me invisible. I smiled. The room fell silent. Then soft sobs broke out. A young employee whispered, She carried all of us." Dylan lashed out, his voice rising in desperation. "Those scribbles don't prove anything." Elaine's voice was cold and cutting. "Every detail aligns with our system records. These are not scribbles. They are a journal of silence you forced her to write." Evan stepped forward, his eyes hard as stone. "Dylan Cross, you poisoned this place. You turned the devoted into the invisible. From this moment, you are permanently terminated." No one rose to defend him. 2 security guards entered, placing firm hands on Dylan's shoulders. He screamed as they dragged him out. "You'll regret this. I'm the one who kept this place alive." But his words echoed hollow and meaningless. The door slammed behind him. Inside the meeting room, all eyes turned to Maya. She sat motionless, tears rolling down her cheeks. Sarah, another employee, reached over, gripping her hand and whispering, "You're not invisible anymore." Evan placed a steady hand on Maya's shoulder, his voice low and resolute. "You kept the soul of this place alive. Now it's time the world sees it." Maya looked up. Through her tears, for the first time, a light began to shine in her eyes. In the world of business, people often believe that revenue and profit are the only measures of success. But the story of Sunset Junction reveals a different truth. The real strength of an organization does not lie in financial reports. It lies in how they treat the so-called invisible people. Maya was once seen as nothing more than a shadow, folding aprons in silence just to remind herself that she still existed. Yet her patience and devotion became a mirror that forced the entire system to reflect. When Evan exposed the truth, it was not only a toxic manager who was removed, it was an entire culture that was reborn. That is the lesson for every leader. Never underestimate the quiet hands. They are the ones who keep the heart of a business beating. If you believe that no one deserves to live in invisibility, press like to spread this message, and subscribe to continue following stories that expose injustice and reaffirm the value of human dignity. And before you leave, drop a comment with the phrase, "No Invisible," to remind us all that everyone deserves to be seen, respected, and recognized.